It's been 3 years now. 3 years ago, I don't think any of us will ever be able to forget the horror of what occurred in Beirut. I have on a number of very special guests from Beirut to talk about that, but I wanted to put together, we put together a clip from some of the work that Daizy had done in her film, but also in a project that she's been doing with profiles of all of the people who died. We only have the first one, but all of them are available on Daizy's Instagram account that is now in the chat, her address. So you can see, I think it's 240 folks who died. They have their personal profiles there. So let me just start, if we can, with that clip that was put together. It's about 1.5 minutes. I think you'll find it compelling. The mother of one of the young men whose profile was featured in that first video. As I said, all of them are now available on Daizy's Instagram account. Thank you so much, Daizy, for putting human faces on the victims. The mother of one of the victims, Elias Khouri's mom, Mireille, is with us. And Mireille, could you come on and just tell, what was it like that day? Tell us about the day. I'm so sorry, again, as I said to you when I first spoke with you, about the terror, the tragedy of your loss, but talk about that day and what it was like and how it is remembered by you and your family.
Thank you, and hello everyone for the call. I lived. My name is Mireille Khouri. I lived about 200 meters from the Beirut port. On that day, we just saw a fire at the port. And then we heard that the firefighter siren. I mean, we thought that it's okay, it's just a fire, and they will just will just fix it. The firefighters are going there. Then after about 20 minutes, the whole world turned upside down, as if I woke up and I fainted, it seems. And I woke up in the middle of the rubble. Like the whole house, all the walls of the house, everything fell on us. I mean, you feel that it's like the end of the world, earthquake. I mean, at first we couldn't know what has happened. That day, in just a second, I lost everything. I mean, I'm a mother of 2 children. I have 2 children, Noor and Elias. Elias was 15 years old back then, and Noor was 20 years. I lost Elias, and my daughter was badly injured, and she went through lots of surgeries, and she has some also to go through. I was injured as well. I mean, on that day, what can I say? On that day, I lost my house, my home. I lost myself, and this is the story. The same story applies to lots of mothers after this explosion. And I mean, really, what shocks you is that the magnitude of this crime, I mean, could have just been avoided if people who are responsible have done their work. I mean, this nitrate shouldn't have entered into the country. This nitrate shouldn't have been stored in the main port of the city and in a residential area where thousands of people commute on a daily basis near a highway. And they stored these materials for 7 years. I mean, this is unbelievable. Something, if only one of these officials did their job as they should have done, this crime could have been avoided. Lots of all these tragedies could have been avoided. My life would have continued normally. I don't know how can they sleep when they know that they have caused all this pain just because they didn't do their job.
Mhm.
And if in the last 20 minutes, can you imagine those people who knew that the nitrate is there and they knew that there was a fire there? The last 20 minutes, they didn't even care to warn the people. They didn't even care to evacuate the area. I mean, if only they told us, we had 20 minutes to leave. Instead of calling the firefighters to their death, they could have called the firefighters to evacuate the area. And this is another crime. This is another crime that no one is talking about.
Thank you, Mireille. And I can only imagine, and I don't want to imagine the horror of that day. But when you talk about responsibility, we have Lama with us, Lama Fakih from Human Rights Watch, who has done an extraordinary report, which we're putting in the chat for everyone to read and pay attention to. Talk to us about the issue of responsibility and what you found in your exhaustive report that you did on the explosion.
I want to talk about the findings of Human Rights Watch's investigation, but before I do that, I want to touch a little bit on the harm from August 4, 2020. You know, we talk about the fact that there were, we believe now, upwards of 240 people who were killed in the explosion, but we know the numbers of people that were impacted far exceeds that. In addition to those that lost their lives, we know at least 7,000 people were injured. At least 150 of these acquired a permanent physical disability. They continue to live with the physical disability today. Over 300,000 people were displaced. They were forced out of their homes. 80,000 of these were children. You know, at a time when we were living through a global pandemic, we saw that the medical infrastructure in the city was wiped out. Public and private schools were destroyed. The physical consequences resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars of damage. There was extensive adverse impact on the environment as a result of the ammonium gas and nitrate oxides that were released into the air. This has had an impact on our health and on the environment to an extent that we don't fully know even up until today. And I want to touch as well on what Mireille has said, you know, that there were actions and omissions by government officials, senior officials, that led to the explosion. This was not an accident. It was not a tragedy that couldn't be avoided. It was something that happened because of actions and failure to act by Lebanese officials. In the context of our investigation, we investigated official documents. We relied on over 100 official documents. We interviewed senior level officials, judicial officials, witnesses, and the findings were clear. That there was responsibility for the explosion at the highest levels, and that the actions and the failure to act amounted to violations under international human rights law, including the violation to the right to life. I want to touch on some of the different officials that were responsible and the roles that they played. in the government. We know from official correspondence that once the roasted ship, which was carrying the ammonium nitrate, came into Beirut's port, that the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Public Works and Transport officials failed to correctly communicate or adequately investigate the potentially explosive and combustible nature of the cargo. The Ministry of Public Works and Transport officials then inaccurately described the risk posed by the cargo to the judiciary in their attempts to have the cargo removed from the ship and into the port. They then moved it to an area of the port that was poorly secured and ventilated, in an area, as Mireille says, that is densely populated commercial and residential area in the country. This practice clearly contravenes international standards regarding ammonium nitrate safe handling and storage. And we know that neither the ministry nor any security agency, of which there are many operating in the port, took the necessary steps to secure the material or establish an adequate emergency response plan. And again, this is key, and it is something that could have saved many lives. Finally, in our report, we note how the Ministry of Public Works and Transport failed to adequately supervise the repair work that was being undertaken on Hangar 12 on August 4, 2020. The official correspondence also makes clear that port, customs, and army officials ignored the steps that they could and should have taken to secure and destroy the ammonium nitrate in the port, again, as Mireille said, which was held there for over 6 years. Customs officials repeatedly took steps to try to sell or re-export the material in a manner that was procedurally incorrect. And even though they were told repeatedly by judicial officials that the procedures were incorrect, they failed to take any other action. They just continued with the same incorrect actions. And this was despite the fact that they could have unilaterally acted to remove the ammonium nitrate and to destroy it. The Lebanese Army Command also brushed off knowledge of the ammonium nitrate. They said they had no need for the material. And they did this even knowing that the nitrogen grade in the ammonium nitrate in Hangar 12 classified it under local law as a material used to manufacture explosives. This required them to approve the importation of this material and to inspect it. Despite that, the military intelligence in the port took no steps to try to secure the material or to establish an appropriate emergency response plan. And this was done with their knowledge of how dangerous this material was. There were repeated warnings from within the government itself about the dangerous nature of the ammonium nitrate and the devastating consequences that would follow from failing to secure the material. And we know that even after security officials from state security completed an investigation into the ammonium nitrate and the risks posed by it, there was an unconscionable delay in reporting the threat to senior officials. And once the threat was known to these officials, they also failed to take the actions needed to secure the material or to protect the public. We can go into some more detail around these actions, but the thing I want to emphasize is that the violations that took place on August 4 are continuing today. And they are continuing through the political interference into the domestic investigation into the port explosion. By allowing this political interference to continue, there is an ongoing violation of the right to remedy. And again, this is a right that is protected under international law for victims to seek and be able to achieve justice in the courts. And this is why we have been urging for domestic reforms that would ensure that this type of political interference cannot continue. And we have also been urging international actors to take steps that would preserve evidence that would ensure that such judicial proceedings could move forward into the future.
Thank you so much, Lama. And again, the full report is in the chat, and so I urge you all to take a look at it. I want to go to Paula for a minute, and then Daizy, I'm going to come to you at the after that. But Paula, you were there on site early on. I remember talking with you back then. I want to ask you both about the scenes on the street that you saw, that you were a part of, and the failure of government, not just to respond to the threat before, but it took a damn French president to come for somebody to go and visit the site as an official. Nobody from the government actually wanted to be there. Talk a little about that and what you saw and felt that led you to resign from Parliament in absolute outrage and frustration. Would you talk to us a bit about the day on the days that followed?
Yes, thank you, Jim, and thank you for everyone who is attending. And I'm very happy to see non-Lebanese also listening to the tragic story of Beirut port. Well, before talking about what I've seen in the street, I would like to tell you that when I think about this day 3 years ago, when I look back to that day, I just can't even imagine that after 3 years, nothing happened, nothing at all. They promised 5 days investigation and the truth will be after 5 days revealed to everyone. And here we are after 3 years, there isn't one person in jail. And they did everything to rig justice and to, keep things as they are. And this is clearly a message that they are the perpetrators. When I say they, it's the mafia that's ruling Lebanon. They are responsible of what happened. And if there is a slight chance that some of them are not responsible, the way they treated, the investigation after the Beirut port, it shows very clearly who is responsible. And it's not only carelessness, because I saw someone typing carelessness when Mireille was talking about that day. It goes beyond that. It's obvious that the ammonium nitrate was going from Georgia to Mozambique on a Russian-leased cargo ship when the captain says he was instructed to make an unscheduled stop in Beirut and take an extra cargo. So it means that this ammonium nitrate was supposed to be in Beirut, and it was destined to be in Beirut because no one in Mozambique claimed the goods that they're supposedly paid for. So the whole story is an very evil party was using this ammonium nitrate, and that's why not the full amount was there, thank God. And what was left was enough to do all the destruction that happened. But I think what happened at the last days, everyone was talking about the nitrate. For 7 years, there was no talk about them. Nobody knew there was ammonium nitrate in the port. Nobody knew about ammonium nitrate. All of a sudden, the last few weeks, there was reports. Someone, tried to do something about it. And this is, I think, when they decided to get rid of the ammonium nitrate. I don't think they knew it can blow up the whole city. And this is why nobody said anything. They thought it will burn and then it will stop. This is honestly my let's say my findings after 3 years of carefully, looking into what happened and honestly talking to judges. The first judge, they said he cannot continue because his house was damaged in the explosion. The second judge took the same path like the first judge, but obviously someone doesn't want the truth to be out, just like all the assassinations, all the incidents that happened before in Lebanon. So, but this one is different. This time it's different. And I don't think, honestly, Jim, we can really, with the power of the mafia in Lebanon, and according to the results of the last elections, I'm telling you, there will be no justice in Lebanon, unfortunately. The only thing we can pursue is international justice. I don't know, an international tribunal for Beirut, something like that. That's the only way you can know what happened one day.
There are lots of international tribunals needed for Lebanon right now, but
I know, but this
we've
is,
done some polling. We did a poll a year ago, and we found several points of consensus. And by consensus, I mean like 80% range, right? That it's overwhelming support in Lebanon. One of them is in the 90% range. It's demanding accountability for the port. There was also, a total, again, almost 80% agreeing with the bankruptcy of the traditional parties. A similar percentage saying they're worse off and they blame the government for the failure to act on the economy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the numbers are great, but the one that was the most striking was that there should be accountability for the port. And yet you had an election where it was not an issue for most of those who were elected. And it must be terribly frustrating to be in a parliament that can't even meet and that can't act to do what is needed to be done to save the country.
But let me just say one thing here, Jim. In Lebanon, there is no government. There is no decision making, a defined place where you can say this guy is responsible of this and that. There's the blame game. Lebanon is governed by political parties. They, slash the cake between them. And then when it comes to responsibilities and accountability, no one is responsible. And this is why the Lebanese people re-elected the same leaders, because every community think that their leader is not the guy to blame. So they do the gerrymandering in Lebanon in a way that everyone talks to his sectarian base, every leader talks to his sectarian base, and this sectarian base believes that leader that he is not the one behind the Beirut blast. He is not the one behind, having the financial meltdown. They're not responsible. So everyone is, all Lebanese wants change, but no one wants to change his own political leader. They want to change the others. And someone is saying Lebanon is occupied by Iran. Yes, this is a fact. However, Lebanese people are re-electing the same political caste. And they are re-electing those who are, in good terms with the Iranian proxy in Lebanon and who is not in good term with them. They are electing all these people, and all of them are going into the same government whenever they need to be in a unity government, or what we call unity. And they continue to rule this way, and you cannot hold anyone responsible because they have the luxury of blaming each one the other. So now Lebanon basically is ruled by a party, many parties, the bank parties, let's say, and you have Hezbollah. Both parties are pretending also that they have, that they are fighting each other. However, if you look at whenever there is, you need to hire people, you need to do it, they will all, be part of it. We've seen it right after the elections. They went into the parliament and they divided the committees between them. So it was, and they kept
It's the nature of the beast. It's a corrupt sectarian elite with Hezbollah as the Praetorian Guard that protects the system for all of them. And but listen, I want to just switch to Daizy for a minute. Daizy, all of the folks who've spoken so far are heroes, each in their own way, in terms of the advocacy on behalf of the families, the leadership in opposition, the research and advocacy for an international tribunal. But you're a hero as well in that way you latched onto this with your incredible film Enough. And now this I think quite powerful series that you've done now, 20 of them, featuring all of the victims with their faces and who they were and what they wanted out of their lives. Putting a human face on tragedy. I mean, the problem is often that we deal with objectified numbers. You know, it's like this many people died, or that many people injured, or 200 people in Gaza, whatever. But it's the faces that matter. It's the names of the people that matter, and you've done that. And I thank you. And I think all of us need to thank you for what you've done here. Talk a little about the process of doing it and the experience you've had dealing not only in Lebanon, but with the expatriate Lebanese community around the world as they see this tragedy unfolding.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Jim, for continuing to talk about Lebanon, to talk about Beirut, to talk about the Lebanese, and constantly engage your community and your members who are very distinguished, and we are very grateful that they are taking such an interest in Lebanon and the situation here. Just to answer your question, it was really Mireille a few weeks back, about a month ago, who reached out to me and asked me if I would help the families with some sort of concept or idea for the upcoming anniversary. And whilst I've been, constantly thinking about it and have done quite a few interviews with the families over the last year, I was very grateful to Mireille and to the victims, the families. I'm always very moved and very touched to be in their presence and to listen and to just see the anguish, the ongoing, sadness and tragedy of not finding resolution. So I really want to thank Mireille and to Davo and the others that invited me into the meeting and gave me a chance to put forward a concept, a creative concept that, with my amazing team, small team, young team here in Beirut, we came up with a very simple concept. It was they're not very familiar with the forget-me-not flower in Lebanon. But, having been brought up in the West, it was like, it just worked so well with the concept because everyone was forgetting the victims, everyone was forgetting the families, everyone was forgetting the injustice and the case. And having traveled recently, as you know, with Najat to Geneva and the UN in New York, having those conversations with high-level officials, wanting them not to forget August 4 and how do we get it in, get a resolution to establish a fact-finding mission. And it all came down to a simple concept because, coming from the world of media and communications, the most effective way to reach people is to keep it simple, stupid, as we are told and trained in media and advertising. And this was the first thing that came to my mind, but you're absolutely right, Jim, about the faces. And I didn't want to just use faces. I wanted to find something that humanized that person. And that's why we sort of had layers in that campaign, and the background behind them all, it said, I had a life. And this is a little glimpse that's, comment was, we looked at their characters and looked, asked some of the parents, what was it about them? But trying to sift through 240 profiles and find something that was about them that we could help you as an audience, help the world, help the officials at the United Nations, at the EU and the Human Rights Council feel for these families, feel for the trauma they're still experiencing, to say, you need to do something about it. And as Lama said, there's a human rights violation being committed here, and there's so much that can be done. And just, however, being able to simplify and deliver a message and do it in a, with that powerful dong, that sound effect that really we hoped would, anytime somebody heard it, would trigger them. Oh, I know what that is, and that's what we hope to do and hope to achieve, so people don't ever forget. And I was so grateful, the Lebanese, I know we love to hate the Lebanese media, but I have to say on this occasion, 5 television stations came through beautifully for us and for the families, and have been showing the campaign on their TV stations, you know, LBC, MTV, Al Jadir, Tele Lebanon, and OTV. So, you know, sometimes they really come through with the goods, but that's really the whole story behind it. And hopefully we will continue that campaign more powerfully, and we have some ideas so that it's not just over tomorrow when we're, you know, when the day ends.
It's over when there's accountability. And I want to go to you, Lama. My doctoral work was in religion, and one of the things I remember was how different concepts emerge in traditional or primitive society. And the idea of hell is something we kind of need, because the idea that people could do really awful things and never pay a price for it in this life, they had to pay a price somewhere else. I'm not willing to surrender to the idea that these people will pay in an afterlife. There has to be accountability now, but how do we get there? And is it even reasonable to think that a campaign could result in an international tribunal or an investigation by the Human Rights Commission that would hold individuals accountable for these crimes? There's just no other word for it. It's either criminal negligence or it's absolute a crime committed with forethought. I mean, it's one or the other, but a crime was committed. People died who didn't have to die. And when I read in your report, you know, the president of the country just dismissing it as it wasn't on my, you know, I didn't know about it, or bad things happen all the time, or the prime minister doing the same. This is just unacceptable. How can they be held accountable? What is the plan that Human Rights Watch puts forward that can be supported?
Thank you, Jim. I think the stakes are too high for us to not continue to press for accountability, both in terms of the price that has been paid by the victims, but also because none of us can be assured that another catastrophe like August 4 would not be repeated. Who has confidence today about the governance in the port or in the security of our country? Until we get to a place where we have an independent judiciary, where we have institutions that are credible, these kinds of tragedies, political crimes, serious violations of human rights are going to continue. And so we have been pressing, you know, for the past 3 years to get international action that would support judicial processes. We've been calling for the Human Rights Council to move forward with establishing an independent investigative mechanism. This would not be a court. It would be a team of experts that are tasked with investigating who was responsible for the August 4 explosion and the related crimes since. These types of investigative bodies can proceed with or without the cooperation of the country. So with or without Lebanon's cooperation, the investigation could proceed. And one of the critical things that it would do is preserve evidence for future prosecutions that are able to take place within Lebanon. And also it would create an official UN record that could be used in judicial proceedings outside of Lebanon, of which there are some now in Europe, in the United States. So this is a clear step that, you know, the members of the Human Rights Council can take to support justice and accountability in the country, to support stability in Lebanon. Countries also have sanctions regimes, you know, human rights and corruption sanctions regimes, which they can and should use to go after those individuals who are responsible for the explosion. You know, this sends a clear message about it not being business as usual, about these states not being willing to continue to partner with those officials who have been responsible for not just this explosion, but for the collapse of the economy and the really very perilous track that the country is on today.
Thank you, Lama. I want to, Maya, are there any specific questions that you see emerging in the chat?
Actually, the one just asked of you, Lama, if you don't mind, a question from Shireen. Would the body investigating that you called for that investigation, would it report back to the International Court in The Hague? What would the process of reporting back that investigation look like?
It would not report to the ICC. The ICC does not have jurisdiction over Lebanon. It would be a team of experts that reports back to the Human Rights Council. It would be a public report. And again, it would be an official UN document, which could then be used in a future judicial proceeding in Lebanon or in judicial proceedings in other contexts. It also would play the critical role of revealing the truth of what happened and of who was responsible, which could create additional political pressure to push forward on reforms that are badly needed inside of the country, and to try to guide the way that diplomats are engaging with different officials inside of Lebanon.
Paula, can I ask you the question about accountability? Short of, I mean, there were judges who took this on. One was removed. One is constantly being victimized by political interference and harassment. Is there a possibility of a court in Lebanon dealing with this and getting the support to do it?
Well, Jim, I was also listening to Maya and to Lama. Actually, I don't feel that there's an appetite when it comes to the international community to pursue the investigation. And this is also coming because I see lots of ambassadors. I see lots of people when I'm traveling. I always, mention the Beirut port and the explosion and what can be done. So honestly, no one said it for me bluntly, but I don't feel that there is this possibility until now. And this is what I always say to the families of the victims. Mireille, for instance, was here. She's also, trying to make most MPs sign a paper asking for this investigation. Definitely, I signed it, and I signed other papers asking for the same thing. Anything international will make things move better here, because they will sweat when they hear that there is a possibility to do something outside of Lebanon, to pursue justice outside of Lebanon. They will try, to find different ways to make things move. What was very disappointing, it was the last American interference in Lebanon. And we have to say that when they pushed for the release of a US citizen, lots of Lebanese has US citizenship. And because of this pressure from a congresswoman who is from Lebanese descent, because of this pressure, they find the opportunity very well for them to release all of them. And when you release all the detainees, it's as if you are closing the issue here. So to be honest, I cannot, I always want to have hope, and this is why I continue in politics. But in Lebanon, with the mafia handling everything, owning everything, doing whatever they want in the judiciary, on all levels in the country, they own the country. And since they are still so strong, I don't see a possibility to continue and to have results when it comes to Lebanese investigation. Mm-hmm. This is why I would love to see them, continuing the work with, on the international level, because this is where you can, have some possibility, or have, to dream of having justice one day.
All right, talk about what we were discussing before we began the program today, about the families and your call for an international investigation. How many families are involved, and what has been your experience with this this sort of activist approach to getting some response to your concerns?
Yes, thank you for this question. Actually, we were just able to get a statement a statement that was presented by the government of Australia in the last Human Rights Council actually in March, not in the last one. And this in itself really is not our aim. I mean, it's not the fact-finding mission that we are looking for. It was just like, it was the first time that a country or a statement that was presented in this way in the Human Rights Council mentioning this crime. I mean, as you have heard in this interview, and I think as you have heard for 3 years now, I mean, I don't think that justice can be served in Lebanon. It will be achieved in Lebanon, because you know the way the government it is now. I mean, there's no real segregation of duty. The justice system is not is really politicized, can be politicized, and it is under the the authority of the politicians. They can manipulate it. There are ethical judges. We cannot say no. There are ethical judges, but the politicians will not leave these judges to work, because there is this element of the conflict of interest. This is ABC of anything. When there is a conflict of interest, because the people who are in power are called for investigation or are called for, I don't know, whatever. So they will not let this to proceed. So our only way is to have it internationally. And given the way that Lebanon has not signed the treaty of the International Criminal Court, and that the government will not be requesting an international tribunal or whatever, the only way that we have, because the explosion, this Beirut blast is really in its essence a crime against human rights. So it is the mandate of the Human Rights Council to look into this violation, and it is their responsibility. And we've been calling them for 3 years now, and they're just turning a deaf ear to us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's obvious that that this will not be resolved in Lebanon. And if they don't want to hear our voices, we as Lebanese, this is not an Lebanese issue, because what they will say is that this is a Lebanese issue and we might be interfering in the Lebanese issues. No, this is not a Lebanese issue. This is in fact an international issue, because the victims are of all nationalities. We have French, American, Australian, Dutch, Belgium, I mean, you name it. There is also the Syrian, Egyptians, I don't know, Bangladesh, Philippines. I mean, it is an international issue. So all these countries who believe in human rights and every day speak about human rights, I mean, and what about this? Isn't it a human right violation?
Lama, let me ask you, and then I want to come to Daizy. Lama, if Lebanon is a failed state by any measure, if a government cannot protect or provide for the rights of its citizens, is there a recourse to international intervention, which is what I think Mireille is pretty bluntly saying, is that this government can't do it, won't do it. It's the very people who, I mean, I remember when Macron came and said, I'll fight to get you money, but first you have to create reforms. And then a couple of days later, the people who gathered to talk about the reforms were the very people who are the problem that have to be ousted in order for reforms to take place. How can there be forward movement? And if there can't be forward movement, is there not a recourse to the International United Nations Security Council or international commission of some sort to do what the government can't, won't, or is unable to do?
So in the absence of government adhering to its obligations under international law, there are a number of things that other states could do, and not just that they could do, but that they should do, and that the very mandate of our multilateral institutions are designed for them to do. We've been talking about the Human Rights Council and the role that the Human Rights Council could play in establishing a fact-finding mechanism. This is clearly within the remit of their authority, and they have done it, and they do it in other country contexts. They should do it. It's a function of getting the political will there for them to act. The UN Secretary General could also act. He could also dispatch a fact-finding mission into the investigation. The UN General Assembly, the UN Security Council, these are also, bodies for which, states could take a vote, and they could make a decision to intervene to try to reveal the truth around what happened on August the 4th. It is a function of political will and states really feeling like this is a priority. And what we have been trying to do through the work that we've been doing with the families, in collaboration with other civil society, in collaboration with Lebanese members of parliament, is building up that political will. And I think this is why we saw in the March session of the Human Rights Council, just this past session in March, that 38 states got up to voice their condemnation of the political interference with the domestic investigation. We are pushing for the council to go further in the September session and to actually table a resolution that would establish a fact-finding mechanism. It does require a lot of work, and I think we would not have gotten as far as we have without the support of the families. But there are some indications that the voices are getting louder. We saw in the very recent EU resolution on Lebanon, which was just passed in July, clear condemnation of the political interference, a clear call to the Human Rights Council to establish such a mechanism, and also a clear call for sanctions for those individuals who there is evidence that they are responsible for the explosion.
Thank you so much. I see a question from Nina to Paula. Maya, do you want to read that?
Sure. Did any of the parliamentarians ever consider sending a group letter from Parliament requesting that a mechanism be set up by the United Nations General Assembly to investigate the blast? After several years, as you may know, the General Assembly finally approved a mechanism for investigating the cases of the missing in Syria. A question from Nina with deep expertise on UN issues.
Okay, hi Nina. We've signed the letters of the families of the victims. This is what we've done so far, and I also work very closely with Melhem Khalaf on the issue. He was the head of the the Lawyers Association, the bâtonnier. I don't know how to say it in English. So yes, I mean, this is what we can do as MPs. This is the maximum that we can do, and I agree totally with Mireille. This is she said it much better than me, but this is what I wanted to say. In Lebanon, there is right now, with these conditions, there's nothing we can do. The only hope will come from outside. From, I don't know, Lama, maybe we can tell us more what we can do. But I mean, for 3 years, the issue of the port explosion was always a priority, and this is why I was telling about also the visits outside Lebanon. We have two concerns: the financial meltdown and the port explosion, and both go back to having justice in Lebanon and having independent judiciary.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember in 2018, there was no port explosion, there was no revolution. One of the most important law that I presented was the independence of the judiciary, and I was on all televisions all the time trying to do a campaign, a massive campaign about it. People didn't grasp the importance of having independent judiciary. I'm not saying that overnight everything will change, but it's very important also to be able to pass some reforms in the parliament, so we can, at least on paper, have some different landscape. Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. I'm going to ask Nina to Nina, if you could put together some ideas. You're still in Lebanon now. Maybe you could actually, we could figure out a way for you to meet with Paula and Lama and Mireille to talk about, and Daizy, to talk about, a specific approach to the General Assembly. Nina has worked at the UN for a long time and has served on special commissions that investigated everything from Cambodia to I don't know where else. I'd like to see if we could arrange that. So we'll do that offline and make that happen. But as we close, I just want to go to Daizy for some final words on what can be done. And Nina, I do want to see if we can arrange that, if that's all right with you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Jim. I actually met with Melham and I'm so
Najat.
tired. Huh?
Yeah, Najat, yeah.
Najat. But we were talking more about a follow-up to a communication they sent to the special envoy. Just I wanted to mention, I'm not an expert on tribunals, but when you mentioned the General Assembly, after I mentioned the example of the investigation of the missing, the request that was finally approved in Syria in the General Assembly, but any body like the General Assembly usually entertains requests from a body of a national government, you know, the UN being an intergovernmental. So when you mention, you know, the possibility of the families of victims sending a request to the General Assembly, I kind of have doubts about how it would be received versus a governmental entity.
Would a letter from members of parliament do?
Well, you see, a group of parliamentarians isn't representative of, you know, the parliament as a body. So I don't know how that would be received.
And
But
there being no government, we're stuck back at that point. So I'm gonna
Well, Lama is saying correctly that, you know, we have plenty of instances of the Human Rights Council. I'm kind of surprised as to why hasn't that has it been tabled? I mean, is there a reticent member or members of the council that wouldn't approve it at this time? Is that why it hasn't gone forth, or hasn't it been initiated? Because that would be the appropriate, but someone asked the question, a good question, that irrespective of whatever international body may be empowered to do it, where would that investigation report go? Although Lama, I do doubt, I was a bit surprised you mentioned that the Secretary General could unilaterally do it, because I don't think that's the case. If it was people or property of the UN itself, but I don't think it can unilaterally.
Clarify this. So one, there have been a group of parliamentarians and others who have signed petitions vis-a-vis the General Assembly. That's an initiative that's been undertaken and that has moved forward. Also, with regard to the Secretary General can establish an inquiry into the investigation. It's something that he can do unilaterally, but he has not shown, you know, again, the political will or aspiration to do this. On the Human Rights Council, I would say, you know, we've heard a lot of reasons for why the members have not taken this up as a priority, including that there are other priorities now vis-a-vis the Human Rights Council. They believe that they don't have, you would need a majority of the current members of the Human Rights Council to support such a resolution. They don't believe they have the votes. France is playing a leading role, of course. Initially, they were saying we need to give space for the domestic investigation to proceed. Then they were saying, oh, now there are going to be elections, let the elections happen. Oh, now give them time to elect a president. You know, this sort of political considerations that they have. And we have continued to go back to the French government, to other governments that are, you know, highly sort of active in this file, to push them to think about this case in a different way, and to really understand how closely it is tied to the future stability of the country and why it really does fall squarely within the mandate of the Human Rights Council. So it's an ongoing fight. It is one, again, that requires a very heavy lift. I think, you know, it is the most appropriate forum for such an investigation to move forward, and this is why we've been focused on it. And unfortunately, some of these other avenues, like the General Assembly and the Secretary General, they have not had as much traction and as much positive response.
Thank you. There's a lot of food for thought here, and I want to continue to think about and talk to you about ways to move forward. But Daizy, I know that you've been meeting with Lebanese expatriates around the world. Talk to us as you wrap up here, the way forward as you see it, and what is being done and from on the grassroots level, and what still can be done.
In all honesty, there is a lot that can be done. My trip with Najat earlier this year to Switzerland, to the United Nations Human Rights Commission Council, our conversations with those members, and also in New York, were very enlightening. Just to go back to the point Nina and Lama were making, one thing that kept coming back to us just very briefly was that they are not hearing enough from Lebanese in the United Nations Human Rights Councils when they have those special sessions. They were very surprised. These are the officials who are very senior representatives of the UN Human Rights Council for Lebanon, for the Middle East and North Africa, who said that we don't understand why more people aren't speaking at those sessions on Lebanon, on August 4, on issues related to Lebanon. So there's a session coming up in September, and I did want to ask Lama or anyone, she would know better if anyone was going to speak on Lebanon in that council session, because they need that. And like Nina stated very clearly, it really requires institutional level interrogation. It can't come from just the MPs. And one thing that they kept mentioning to us about this independent investigation or fact-finding mission was that it has to be there has to be enough evidence. And they kept going on about the UN special rapporteurs, but we have to follow the procedure of the United Nations to request them to come in, and those requests have been made, and they're sitting on the website of the United Nations with a whole list of special rapporteurs that have been requesting to come to Lebanon, but the Lebanese government has not responded or has not allowed them to come to Lebanon. There is a lot of stuff happening, but on the investigation, it requires a champion in the Human Rights Council. It requires a nation to champion the cause, like Australia did to get the statement going, even though Australia isn't the human rights member of the Human Rights Council at the moment. We got told that we need to identify a smaller nation that doesn't have a lot of risk, because you can't go to France, you can't go to the big nations. They're too leveraged out to other, there's too much on them to be able to take this up. But if we found a nation, a smaller nation that believed in human rights, that may have had a victim that was, impacted by the August 4, and we lobbied them hard, then we could get them to work as our agent within the Human Rights Council to help push for that fact-finding mission. So there's a lot to be done. On the ground with the diaspora, we're in the middle of an incredibly historic 2-day workshop. It's taken over a year and a half of hard work to try and bring together members of different diaspora groups who are very active, very well-intentioned, very passionate. If it wasn't for the diaspora, Lebanon would have gone to the dogs by now, as we would say in Australia. But thank God that the Lebanese diaspora for decades and for a long time have been underwriting Lebanon and keeping the economy afloat. I think they contribute more than 40% of the GDP. But we're here to try and work with Paula, with other members of Parliament, to understand how we can collaborate, work more effectively to bring forward effective agenda, strategies, actions, externally and internally to try and become more, a force to be reckoned with. And Paula today spoke to the group and very, very eloquently and very passionately about how the diaspora's role is really critical. We are working on the ground, and we're trying to bring together that diaspora. And, there's so much work to be done. It's not a one thing, it's a many, many levers that we have to pull and try to bring this together. But the most important thing is perception. And tomorrow is a critical anniversary. And what's important is that we want hundreds of thousands of people to be down at the port. We need noise. We need the world to know that the Lebanese are still completely unrelenting about the issue of this call for justice. And there are going to be demonstrations all around the world in solidarity with the victims' families tomorrow. And we honor the Lebanese, and we ask all non-Lebanese who believe in justice to also participate, even if it's for 10 minutes or half an hour, to stand with Lebanese for justice, because as Martin Luther King Jr. said and teaches us, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's what this is about. We as human beings need to stand together.
Thank you, Daizy. Thank you so much for what you've been doing, and Mireille, for the sorrow that you feel and the way you've been able to transform that into action on behalf of the victims and their families and the country. And Lama, for the incredible work that you've done and continue to do. And honestly, if people have not read the report, you got to read the report. It's in the chat. Please do. And Paula, thank you again for your continued leadership on so many levels. You're just great. I feel so honored to have the four of you with me today. Lama.